Ladies and gentlemen, today I am going to talk about the history of modern international law during the time period of 19th and 20th century. To know about the earlier history of international law, please feel free to watch my previous episodes. In this episode, I will be talking about 18 instances of development of modern international law. The first instance that I want to talk about is the Congress of Vienna that took place in the year 1815. It was a series of international diplomatic meetings to discuss a new European order post the downfall of Napoleon Bonaparte. And this Congress led to very significant agreements on settlement of national boundaries within Europe and certain other agreements on freedom of navigation. Now, the second instance that I want to talk about is the Monroe Doctrine that was given by the then President of United States, James Monroe. According to this doctrine, any intervention by any external power in the politics of United States is a potentially hostile act against the United States of America. Basically, if some foreign country is meddling in the political affairs of United States, then the United States might view it as an act of war. And this doctrine is still significant today, though this doctrine has been slightly modified in today's context. The third instance that I want to talk about is another doctrine. It is called the Kalvo Doctrine, and it was given by Carlos Calvo, who was a very famous Argentine jurist. This doctrine was given in the year 1824 and it mostly deals with international investment disputes. It says that jurisdiction in international investment disputes lies with the country in which the investment is located. So if an American company is investing in India, then if it has a dispute with regard to its Indian investment, that dispute could be raised only before the Indian courts and it cannot be raised before the foreign courts. The fourth instance in this series is the Treaty of Nanking in the year 1842. This treaty ended the first opium war between Great Britain and Qing dynasty of China. Its significant provisions involved cession of Hong Kong to Great Britain or the Crown. So now you know how Hong Kong was a British colony back then. And this was considered as a very unequal treaty. The fifth instance that I want to talk about is the first Geneva Convention for the amelioration of the condition of the wounded in armies in the field. Basically, International Red Cross Society was also formed during a similar point of time, and it was observed that many of the soldiers and citizens who were involved in war were dying due to lack of medical care. So there was an urgent need to look into this aspect, and therefore this convention was entered into. In the next year, that is in the year 1865, International Telegraph Union was established, and this union dealt with international interconnections, standardization of equipments that were used for telegrams, and for setting up the tariffs of telegram and telegraph. The seventh instance of development of international law is the Sino-Japanese Friendship and Trade Treaty. This treaty took place in the year 1871 between China and Japan, and both the countries mutually pledged for friendship and cooperation. They also undertook to make exchange of ambassadors, and this treaty also contained some trade related provisions. Thereafter, in the year 1899, a very significant development in the history of international law took place. First Hague Peace Conference took place that established the Permanent Court of Arbitration. So it was one of the first global courts in the history of international law. Now let us come to the 20th century. The first event of 20th century that I want to talk about is the First World War that took place from 1914 to 1918. And as a result of First World War, Treaty of Versailles was also entered into. As you know that Germany was heavily defeated in First World War, and Treaty of Versailles contained various provisions that provided for disarmament of Germany, payment of reparations or compensation by Germany to the Allied states, and for territorial concessions as well. In the next year, that is in 1920, Paris Peace Conference took place, and this established the League of Nations, a worldwide intergovernmental organization to maintain world peace. This was the first truly global international organization that had so many countries within its umbrella. How successful was League of Nations? It is very debatable. In the same year, that is in 1920, Permanent Court of International Justice was also set up. Thereafter, 3 years later, Hague Academy of International Law was also established for doing cutting-edge research on the subject of international law and for preparing various documents and instruments that would be helpful for various countries in formulation of international law. Now, the 14th instance in this series is the Kellogg-Bryant Pact in the year 1928. This was an international agreement on peace, and it was aimed at preventing the Second World War. We know that this Kellogg-Bryant Pact was highly unsuccessful, as Second World War could not be prevented, and Second World War took place from 1939 to 1945. And because of this Second World War, countries realized that how miserably League of Nations has failed, and there is a need of a new truly global organization that would make sure that no such world war ever happens again. So, in this regard, on 26th June 1945, the Charter of United Nations was signed by many countries. And United Nations, as you know, is the only global organization that has currently more than 200 members. Now, there are two more developments that I want to talk about. First is the replacement of Permanent Court of International Justice that was established in the year 1920 by International Court of Justice. This event took place on 18th of April 1946. And the last event that I want to talk about is the adoption of Universal Declaration of Human Rights by United Nations General Assembly. This took place on 10th of December 1948, and this is considered as a very significant development in international law, as it led all the countries to follow some basic minimum standards in relation to human rights. So I hope I have been able to explain you the history of modern international law succinctly, and in the next episode I will be covering some more details in relation to history of modern international law. We will move on from 1948 and we will cover the other important events that have taken place post 1948 till now. So stay tuned. See you next time.